Let's talk a little bit about scope. What does scope mean? What examples can we show? And why is it important? Well, let's talk about scope. Scope, to begin with, is where in our programs is a function or a variable visible, right? So let's get into it. So for example, let's say I have age equals to 10. If I have some function and I say change age, and I say age equals 20 now, let's go ahead and invoke that function, change, and then let's just print what the age is, and we'll see exactly what I mean. So, by the way, this is a bad practice, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Age is shadowing this age variable. That means that there's an age in the global scope, and then there's an age in the local scope, local to this function. So that's a bad practice. Why? Because developers like ourselves could get confused when referencing the age variable, because we may think it's 10 because we think it might be referring to the outside scope or the global scope, or we could, interpret this as, hey, this is the the scope of the function. It might be 20. And so that's confusing. You should really have different names for these variables. And if you mouse over it, that's exactly what you get with PyCharm. You get shadows name age from the outer scope. It's just not a good practice anyway. But for our purposes, I want to show you that age 10 here is a global scope, and this is age 20 here. It's inside the function. This is a different scope. And if I print this, I'm going to show you that we're going to print 10, even though we do invoke this function here, change age, and we say age assign 20 to it, right, the integer 20, but outside when we print it here, it's still referring to 10. So what does that mean? That means that this is a global scope. This is a different variable here. We're making a copy of this name, age, and we're going to make that point to 20. So there's essentially two different variables, one that's global and it's holding 10, and the one that is internal and it's holding 20. Now, maybe what your next question would be, hey Ed, but why can't I access or change? Why can't I change the global scope inside the this function? And the answer would be that you can. There's a specific keyword for that, and it is called global. Global. So you can say, hey, global age. That basically says to Python, hey, age is going to be this. I want to refer to this global age. I don't want to make a copy of age. So therefore, when I print, when I assign age here and then I go ahead and print it, I don't want 10. I really want it to be 20. So if I run this, you'll see that that's exactly what we get. Right. So far, just to kind of a quick overview, there's a global scope. There is a local scope, right, to this function, and there's also an enclosing scope. And what I want to show you here is, imagine that you have my age, which is a different variable, and here we have a function inside a function, and we can have that in Python, which is really neat. We can have a function here to say get age, and what we can do is we can say print my age. Oops. My age. And you could do something like this, of course, and that shouldn't be any surprise, because in this scope we can access the outer scope, which is the enclosing scope, right? It's a function that has a function, and we can go up in scope. Just like change age here could have went up in scope and get the 10, right? We could do the same thing here. And print my age. Oh, you know what it is? We're not actually calling this function. So let's do that. Let's invoke this function. And now we should see something being printed. And we see 20. Let's just say 200 here to make it obvious. And we'll see that it's 200. 200 gets printed. And outside here, we get the 10, which is this 10 here. So to recap, what's a big idea? The big idea is that you can think of scoping or scope as having a box that contains a box, and that box can contain another box, right? So you can have nested boxes, and what you could see is that that inner box can see the outer box, and that outer box can see any outer boxes as well. But what you can't do is the inverse. You can't say, hey, that containing box, that main box, well, it cannot look at the contents of the inner box, right? So what do I mean? So from out here, this scope, this global scope, cannot look inside the box here, this inner scope. And this inner scope cannot look inside this box here, this inner scope. But the other way around, you can. You can say, hey, look, this inner box, can you look outside to the enclosing box? Yes, you can. And can you look outside of that box? And yes, you can. So hopefully that helps just with the concept of lexical scoping, which is exactly that. I hope this helps.